They were there, together, closer than they'd been since being separated. But this was no reunion. A thick, cold wall divided them. Two death row cells in the death house, close enough to hear each other's voices, but too far to touch. It was June 18, 1953. Only 24 hours remained before this perfect Cold War story would close its final act. The execution of two working-class Jewish communists inside New York's Sing Sing prison. Husband and wife, mother and father, Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. Their names dominated front pages, ignited protests, and became a blood-soaked political drama. Traitors to some, martyrs to others. Now both had reached the final stop before the electric chair. One thing was certain, their last 24 hours were unlike anything we'd witnessed until that day. In those hours, the air inside the death house was suffocatingly heavy. Sounds echoed through the corridors, footsteps of guards, iron bolts clanging together, all reminders of the inevitable. Condemned prisoners in their final 24 hours typically go through a strange psychological cycle, from denial, through anger, then bargaining with fate, to acceptance. But with Julius and Ethel, there was something different, a terrifying calmness, as if they'd passed through all those stages long ago. 40 beginners over, in 19 its peak, the great enemy now had nuclear weapons. The Soviet Union had just detonated their first atomic bomb, far too soon to be explained. America's gaze turned inward. They wanted answers. The trail led to David Greenglass, an army machinist at Los Alamos, birthplace of the Manhattan Project and the atomic bomb. He confessed to handing over secrets, sketches, descriptions, diagrams. But he also pointed to someone else, his brother-in-law, Julius Rosenberg, a former Army Signal Corps engineer. Minimized to the FBI, Julius was the architect of a Soviet espionage network, recruiting friends, colleagues, even family to pass atomic intelligence to the other side. But the investigation didn't stop with Julius. It continued spreading, and before long, authorities caught scent of Ruth Greenglass, David's wife. She wasn't just an outside observer. She passed messages, arranged meetings, helped move information. And just before authorities closed in, David made his move. In a desperate gamble, he gave them someone else to chase, his own sister, Ethel. He claimed she was the one who typed up the secrets, the sketches and diagrams for Stalin's bomb. A lie that became the backbone of the entire prosecution. Years later, when asked how he could do it, David said, "I would not sacrifice my wife and my children for my sister." Blindness. The McCarthy era was raging across America, the communist hunting obsession turning every suspicion into evidence, every friendship into conspiracy. Public pressure was like collective fever. The trial moved quickly. The whole world watched. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg were convicted of conspiracy to commit espionage. That charge alone wasn't enough for execution, so they called it treason. They said the Rosenbergs had helped transfer atomic secrets to Moscow. The judge agreed. On April 5, 1951, he sentenced both to death. Justice or fear had claimed its price. That evening, across the river in New Jersey, two boys lay restless in the darkness. Michael, 10 years old, and Robert, 6. This was a burden no child should have to carry. Too heavy to sleep, too cruel to dream. Going to bed without a kiss from their mother had become routine. But routine never made it hurt less. Children understand death in ways no one wants them to. Not through books or movies, but through absence. Through the empty chair at the dinner table. Through the whispers of adults when they walk into a room. Through pitying glances from neighbors. They knew their mother wasn't home. They knew she might never come back. But their young minds still refused to believe it completely. Every night, Robert left a pillow beside him, hoping that one day his mother would lie down there. Michael, older and more aware, lay staring at the ceiling, trying to remember his parents' faces before those images faded. Just days earlier, they'd written a letter, a child's innocent plea, scrawled in shaky handwriting on lined paper and sent to the President of the United States. "We cannot live without our parents. Please let them stay with us." No answer came, but hope remained, fragile as thread. flooring as children have become silent victims of the death penalty system. Psychological studies show that children who lose parents to execution don't just face the pain of loss, but also bear social stigma, the judgment of those who see them as children of criminals, of traitors. They grow up with unanswerable questions. Did my parents really do it? Do I carry the blood of a traitor? These wounds never heal. Across the country, lawyers held their breath, waiting for the final decision. A desperate appeal to the United States Supreme Court, begging for a stay of execution. And while awaiting the court's decision, a new complication emerged, not from law, but from calendar. If the court denied the stay, as many feared, the execution would fall in the middle of the Jewish Sabbath, the day of rest and prayer, lasting from Friday sunset to Saturday sunset. The original execution time, 11 p.m. Friday, was hours after Sabbath had begun. The day before, a lawyer from the defense team met with Judge Irving Kaufman. She made a simple, humane request: don't let them die on the Sabbath. Surprisingly, even the government hesitated at this image. Attorney General Herbert Brownell met with Kaufman, and the judge made a promise. If the stay was denied, the execution would be moved. Hope flickered. One more day, one more fragile chance. If the execution didn't happen before June 19th, the last day within the court's own deadline, the entire machinery would have to start over. A new day, a new battle, perhaps weeks of life bought by a single missed night. Outside the gates of Sing Sing, crowds grew larger. Supporters lit candles and held signs reading, "We are innocent." The opposition shouted back, waving banners screaming, "Death to the communist rats." Slogan against slogan, hope against fury. This was a phenomenon history had witnessed many times, when law becomes political theater, when death becomes symbol. The Rosenberg case was no longer just about Julius and Ethel. It was about the Cold War, about communism, about fear and power. Then the news came. The Supreme Court had spoken. No explanation, no dissent, just one word: denied. The final appeal had vanished, and with it, every last legal barrier. Outside, the world knew. Inside, the Rosenbergs were still waiting. Mid-afternoon, Attorney General Herbert Brownell announced the final decision, delivering the news to the press. At Sing Sing, Warden Wilfred Deno carried it straight to Julius and Ethel. Brownell had kept his word. There would be no execution on the Sabbath. But what happened next was a shock no one saw coming. There would be no new day, no delay. The execution was set for 8 p.m. that evening, just minutes before sunset. The clock didn't slow down, it accelerated. They'd avoided the Sabbath by the thinnest margin possible. And this wasn't just about respecting tradition. This was about controlling the moment. By moving the time forward, they limited protests, limited the press, limited the chance for anything or anyone to intervene. This was a sophisticated legal and political tactic. If they waited until the next day, there would be 24 more hours for lawyers to search for new loopholes, for activists to organize larger demonstrations, for international public opinion to apply pressure. But with this sudden decision, there was no more time. No other options. The execution machinery had been switched on and could not be stopped. New York State Police activated the lockdown plan. 170 officers moved in, sealing off the area. Even patrol boats lined up on the Hudson River. Control had to be absolute. But one critical piece was missing: the executioner. Joseph Franzel, the man who operated the electric chair, was still at home in Cairo, New York. He wasn't a government official, just a local electrician who traveled to carry out executions. The role of people like Franzel in the American death penalty system is a dark paradox. They're ordinary people, electricians, plumbers, people with technical skills, but who also bear the moral burden of ending lives. Many of them never reveal their true occupation to family or friends. They live with the secret, with nightmares about the faces of those they've killed. Officials tried calling. No answer. Panic spread quickly. 2 FBI agents were dispatched, racing north to find him. Their orders were simple: find him, bring him back. No matter what, everything had to happen before the sun disappeared. The schedule inside Sing Sing collapsed under the sudden change as time was compressed. There was barely time to follow standard procedures. The Rosenbergs were offered a last meal, but quietly refused. They chose not to eat. They chose to talk. They spent their final hours in the visiting room, speaking softly, separated by glass but spiritually connected, facing each other one last time. No panic, no tears, just gentle, steady words between them. There was a remarkable calmness between them, even in those final hours. The warden noted it. This was the final stage of facing death, acceptance. Psychologists call it paradoxical peace, when the mind stops fighting and accepts the inevitable. But with Julius and Ethel, it didn't feel like surrender. It felt like resolve. Down the hall, another meeting was underway. Hidden in shadow, the FBI waited for their final gamble. They'd spent days preparing for this moment. The day before, agents had slipped through the gates and set up a secret command post inside the warden's garage, shrouded in secrecy. 2 secure phone lines, one to the garage, one at the death house. If Julius or Ethel confessed, even while already strapped to the chair, the execution could be stopped. Agents had rehearsed every detail. Internal memos made it clear, if the Rosenbergs confessed, interrogations could last as long as necessary, stretching into months if needed. The focus was Julius. The FBI still believed he might break in those final hours. Ethel was an afterthought. A 13-page memo outlined everything they would ask Julius if he talked. Only one question pertained to her. Did your wife know about your activities? That was it, nothing more. While final preparations began, personal items collected, clothing for the occasion, legs shaved for electrode contact, someone on the outside made one last desperate move. Their loyal defense attorney, Emmanuel Bloch. Bloch carried a handwritten letter from Ethel, not pleading for herself, but for her family. A letter addressed to Dwight D. Eisenhower, President of the United States. She addressed him with respect, despite having once called him a fascist enforcer. But the plea never made it inside. No one opened the door. So it all ended there, outside the White House gates. Devastated but determined, Bloch relayed a final message to the prison. Tell them I did my best for them. Tell them I love them, and so does all the world. The executioner had arrived. Reporters took their seats. No family, no friends. Everything was ready. At exactly 8 p.m., Julius Rosenberg was led into the execution chamber. Harsh fluorescent lights blazed down, casting sharp shadows on the concrete floor. The thick smell of ammonia disinfectant hung in the air, mixed with the cold sweat of fear. In the center of the room, a black-painted wooden chair with thick leather straps and metal electrodes reflecting the cold light. This wasn't just a chair, this was a killing machine. Julius's knees trembled when he saw it. His body, though his mind had prepared, still reacted to survival instinct. 2 guards had to support him, guide him to the chair, help him sit down. They worked mechanically, accustomed to this task. Leather straps around chest, arms, legs, electrodes attached to head and leg, everything checked twice. In the garage below, a 6-person FBI team waited beside 2 secure phones. They waited for a crack, a confession, a signal. But nothing came. No final words, no confession, no last-minute plea. The secrets stayed with him. With a single pull, the executioner sealed the end. Electricity coursed through Julius's body. His body stiffened, then slumped. At 8:06 p.m., Julius Rosenberg was pronounced dead. When his body was removed, a guard stepped forward to wipe down the chair with ammonia. The acrid chemical smell. Then it was Ethel's turn. 2 female guards escorted her into the execution chamber. At the doorway, Ethel stopped. She kissed one goodbye, shook hands with the other. A gesture of civilization in the most savage moment. Then she walked in, calm, defiant. She walked to the chair on her own. No one needed to guide her. No resistance as the straps were tightened. This was a terrifying kind of calm, Not surrender, but absolute resolve. In those moments, Ethel Rosenberg was not a victim. She was a woman facing death with dignity no one could take away. Rabbi Irving Kozlow began reading Psalm 31. "In thee, O Lord, do I put my trust. I am forgotten as a dead man, like a broken vessel." Ethel remained silent. Her silence was louder than any final words. Then, without warning, the first shock struck. Electricity ran through her body. But it didn't work. The second followed. Still, nothing happened. Doctors checked. Her heart was still beating. This was the horror of the electric chair, an imperfect method, inhumane, sometimes turning quick death into prolonged torture. When the voltage isn't sufficient, or when electrodes aren't placed correctly, the victim doesn't die immediately. They burn from the inside. They experience seconds or minutes of unimaginable pain before mind and body finally surrender. Prohibited. Third shock. Fourth. Fifth. Each time, Ethel's body jerked up, then slumped down. The acrid smell of burning flesh filled the room. Witnesses turned away. Nearly 5 minutes passed, a time that felt eternal in the crushing silence. Finally, at 8:11 p.m., Ethel Rosenberg was pronounced dead. The sun set over the Hudson River. Witnesses later recalled that the sky turned a vivid blood red, a strange backdrop for that moment. The executions were over. But the debate had only begun. In the years that followed, as FBI files were gradually declassified, doubt grew. What was Ethel's real role? David Greenglass's testimony about her typing secret documents, the backbone of the indictment, was eventually admitted by him to be false. He fabricated it to save his wife. Ethel may have been only a victim of a system that wanted blood, wanted a symbol, wanted to send a message during the Cold War era. She may have died not for what she did, but for what she represented. To this day, the Rosenberg case remains one of the most controversial executions in American history. Did justice or Cold War paranoia go too far? Two people paid with their lives for a crime one of them may never have committed. And two orphan children, Michael and Robert, grew up with a question that would never be answered. Did their parents truly betray their country, or were they merely pawns in a much larger game?